What are you live streaming?
Yeah,
What gave me a live stream?
too late. You have a mic?
Nah.
Ah, today's fine. I'll just get closer then.
Can't use it if you're charging your phone.
But that's true.
No, you don't need to put it close. Last time I checked the stream when Chef Shai was here, the audio was really good.
Well, it's because I don't think you use the board anymore. If you use the board, I'll pull back. That's it. Heard Hassan might come today.
He's not coming.
He said he might do 80%.
Bro, he's not coming all the way 2 hours to come here.
He said 80% might come. Now it was coming from last time.
80%? Today he was like, I'm gonna leave. It looks bad. They're atrocious.
I'm live and no one's here yet, so what's the point?
ashab al-a'dhar, people who have valid excuses, they, for example, cannot control their urine. Some people have what's called, did this go out? Some people have, what is it called? Incontinence. Yes, incontinence. Their urine flows and they don't have control, right? They don't have control of how it flows. There may be some drops that, that come out outside of their control. People with flatulence who have excessive gas and they don't have control of that. And certain other conditions similar, they can make wudu before they pray, and if they lose their wudu due to that condition that they have, they still continue on with their prayer, even if it happens inside of prayer, and their prayer is valid. If that's a condition. If it's something that happens, a couple times here and there, then they should wait till then they should ensure that they capture the time when that's not there. But if it's a constant condition, then one can take that. And so, for example, people as they get older, they lose control of certain bodily functions and so forth, more so. So if it's time for dhuhr, for example, say it's 1 o'clock, dhuhr comes in, someone has an issue with one of these things mentioned, they make wudu, they can pray their sunnah for dhuhr. Let's say they make wudu, and let's say they lose their wudu 1 minute in, or 2 minutes in, or whatever it is. They still go ahead and pray. They can pray their sunnah before, they can pray their fard, they can pray their sunnah, they can read Quran, anything that they would normally do with that one wudu, and it's all valid. But then when Asr comes in, they have to make wudu again. Their wudu is not valid from dhuhr. But everything that they did during dhuhr that is attached to that wudu at that time is good, even though they lost their wudu technically. You follow what I'm saying? All right. Wiping over the socks. Any questions before we move on? Okay. So, wiping over the socks. So, number one, the first section is on the proof of its legitimacy, and any book of fiqh that you read, you will see that a multiplicity of Sahaba, dozens and dozens, 70 or 80 Sahaba narrated that they saw the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wiping over his footwear, and meaning he didn't wash his feet for wudu. He simply wiped over them, right? And that is something that is valid. And the reason why there's a bit of stress on that also is because amongst the Shia, it's not valid. Wiping over the socks is not something that's valid. Even though they wipe over the bare feet, they don't wash it. They don't wash them. So there's a bit of stress there as a point of differentiation. And so that's that's just showing the mashru'iyya, the sharia basis as to why we wipe over footwear, I'll call it, because there is some difference here about socks. What is considered a viable footwear that one is allowed to wipe over? And so, for example, the Hanafis, they have they make certain conditions for that footwear. So during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they would wear what's called khuf, leather socks. The Prophet ﷺ used to wear these leather socks. So some of the madhabs, including in the Hanafis, they say that the footwear has to be of a certain type. So leather is fine. Other footwear, for example, has to share some of the qualities of leather. It has to have a certain thickness. You have to be able to walk so much distance in it for it to be considered wipeable. You see what I'm saying? But others, Imam Ahmed, for example, and those that followed his way, and many of the modern day scholars, they said, no, any type of footwear, even if it's thin socks, thin dress socks that we wear today, that's something that you are allowed to wipe over, given the certain, the proper parameters of how that's done. So, wiping over the slippers here are not to be understood as like flip-flops or something like that, but it means what's worn over socks, shoes that you wear over socks. And what that means is that shoes that completely cover the feet, the same way in which socks do, that have to be valid. So for socks to be valid, for you to wipe over them, they have to cover the whole foot, right? They have to go up to this point. They have to be above that point right there, right? If you wear those like low cut tennis socks that like go underneath this round part of your foot, you're not covering enough of the foot to wipe over. You follow what I'm saying? And so same with footwear, shoes over the socks, it also needs to cover over that point for you to be able to wipe over. So what does it mean when we say wipe over it? Well, there are certain conditions. So the conditions for wiping over the socks are the following, as it's here on the bottom of page 45. Number one, you must have put your socks on while you were in a state of tahara, a state of wudu. So for example, I made wudu, let's say it's 5 p.m. I made wudu, I wasn't wearing socks, I washed my feet all the way through, right? And wudu is done. Let's say 5:05, I put on socks, right? And then, let's say I lost my wudu, but my socks remained on throughout. Now it's 5:30. It's time for me to pray. I make my wudu, and then at the end I don't have to take off my socks because I put them on while I was in a state of wudu. Then I can wipe over my socks. Follow? And so that's number one. And they cite the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where one of the Sahaba mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ did as much. And what else is mentioned here?
Quick question.
Yes.
So when you do wipe the sock, is it like 3 times at the bottom?
Yes, good question. So the next section there is the place to be wiped, right? So the place to be wiped is mentioned by the same Sahabi, Sa'id al-Mughira. He said, I saw the Messenger of Allah wipe over the top of his socks. And so, and then he quotes Sayyidina Ali, radiallahu anhu, who says, لولا كان الدين بالرأي لكان مسح باطن الخف أولى. Sayyidina Ali said in his famous statement that if this deen was to be taken by opinion, meaning just like by what we thought was the right way of doing things, rather than what was the practice of the Prophet ﷺ, it would seem to make sense that you would wipe the bottom of your socks from a cleanliness perspective or something like that, right? But he's using this action of the Prophet ﷺ that he said you wipe over the top to say that, look, we don't derive what we do in our deen based on our opinion when there is clear evidence in the Quran and the Sunnah, right? So let's say some people say, well, that doesn't make sense. But if it's firm and established in the Quran and Sunnah, that's what we take, that's what we go by. It doesn't matter what somebody subjectively thinks on their own, no. And so anyway, Sayyidina Ali is making that distinction. So, so we don't wipe the bottom, we wipe the top, right? As per the practice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's done one time. And it's done one time. You know, some of the madhab, they'll mention like specifically how do you do that? You just take like over the top like that. At one and the same time. If you do one first and then the second after, fine, no problem. There's not very specific guidance on that, but some of the books of fiqh of the particular madhabs be a little more specific, but there is no specificity to that. It's just a general taking of your fingers and wiping over the top. The duration of the wiping, this is important. How long can I wipe for? It's not an unlimited time span. For those that are residents, meaning you're not traveling, it's 1 day. 1 day, 24-hour span, basically. For those that are traveling, it's 3 days, right? Although I don't recommend you do that for 3 days, to be wearing the same funky socks, right, for that long, will cause other problems, especially for the people around you, right? So after that 1 day period, you can no longer wipe. You have to remove your socks, fully wash your feet, and then if you want to put on preferably a different pair of socks, then you do that, and then you can wipe for another day, right? But for some people, that's just convenient, that for some reason they do that, there may be, whatever reasons that people have. But it can only be a maximum of 24 hours. And now at the bottom here it says, some say that the duration begins with the time of wiping, while others say it begins from the time of nullifying the ablution wearing the socks. So this is important. For those of you that do, you do take this rukhsa, you do take this dispensation, because for whatever reason you like wearing socks and it's just easier for you to wipe and, you won't be lifting your feet into the sink to wash them or whatever it may be. How do you measure that? Well, some of the ulama, they said that the time begins with the time of wiping. So, for example, let's say I made wudu at 1 p.m., right? And let's say I lost my wudu and then I made wudu again at 2 p.m. And I left my socks on from, the whole time. And then I wiped over them, right, at 2 p.m. when I made wudu again. So my wudu is valid till 2 p.m. the next day. Others, they say that the wudu, the 24-hour period begins from the time when I lose my wudu. So let's say I made wudu at 1 and I lost it at 1:30. And remember I made wudu again at 2, right? So according to the first opinion, it's when I made wudu again and wiped over. But according to other opinion, it's 1:30 when I lost my wudu. Right? I may not have made wudu right away. You follow what I'm saying? Make sense? I don't think most people are, wearing their socks that long, but it's important for those of you that do, that you understand what that limit is, so you're not violating, you're not going beyond what's allowed, right? Because then your wudu is invalid, and then your salah is invalid because your wudu is invalid. Yes?
Would that mean it's valid just for 24 hours on one wudu, or is it multiple?
Say again?
So you know how you were saying when you make the wudu and then you put your socks on, and then you lose your wudu around 2 p.m. and then after you make the wudu with the wipe over your socks, it's valid till 2 p.m. the next day. Is it just that one wudu that's valid, or say you lost your wudu again and you have to wipe over it? Does that like reset in 24 hours?
So you're saying, I made wudu at 1 p.m., I didn't have my socks on, I washed my feet. At 1:30, I lost my wudu, but my socks were on the whole time, right? I didn't make wudu right away. At 2 p.m., I made wudu. And then let's say again at 4 p.m., I lost my wudu, but I kept my socks on. I can still continue to wipe, and so on for the whole day. As long as my socks are on, I can continue to wipe. Does that make sense? Does it?
That's valid till 2 p.m. the next day.
I'm sorry?
That's valid till 2 p.m. the next
Yes,
day.
correct.
Not 4 p.m. since you had to.
No, yeah, good. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Only on the first wipe. Yeah. Okay. Good question. All right. And then the description of the wiping. What does this say here? After the person completes his wudu and puts on his socks or slippers, it is proper for him to wipe over them later on when he wants to perform wudu. Just like I said, right? You can wipe over your socks multiple times within that 24 hours. You can make 10 wudu if you want, as long as you keep the socks on. As soon as you take the socks off, the wiping dispensation is no longer valid, right? But let's say, for example, I made wudu at 1 p.m. And I had wudu this whole time, I kept it. But then let's say at 2 p.m. I took my socks off. But let's say I had still kept my wudu, and then I put my socks back on for some reason. And then at 3 p.m. I still have my wudu from 1 p.m. and I took my socks off. And I put it back on. It's no problem. You can take it on as long as you kept your wudu. Right? And then if I lost my wudu, let's say at 4 p.m. with my socks on, I can keep them on and wipe. You follow? But if I lost my wudu at some point in between, then it's, and my socks were off, obviously I need to wash them again from the beginning. Okay? If anything is confusing, please raise your hand. These are important points because our deen is based on the validity of actions are based on these rulings.
So if I make wudu without my socks and then I put my socks on and I want to pray now, do I have to make wudu and wipe, or does my previous wudu still count?
As long as you kept your wudu, you're fine.
Like, so I don't have to
Correct.
wipe the socks.
Correct. As long
And then in regards to wiping socks, does it have to be with water?
as opposed to?
Like, you wipe it with water in your hand rather than your hand just being dry.
Yes, you're what? So let's say I made wudu at 1 p.m. At 1:30, I lost my wudu and my socks are on. So I make wudu again, and I wash all of my parts of my body that I'm supposed to wash for wudu. And then when it comes to my socks, yes, it's with wet hands. It's with wet hands. Wiping is different than washing. Wiping is just simply wet hands, taking them over and wiping them on the side. Doesn't mean like taking a cup full of water, right? It just means my hand is moist from the water. That's all it is. But not dry. Dry is not wiping. Is not a proper wiping. It doesn't mean just running my hand. It doesn't mean I make wudu, all my hands, my face, etc. And then I go to the towel and dry my hands and then I go on my feet. No, that's not wiping. Wiping is with the hands still wet. Anybody else? Okay. And then it says what invalidates the wiping. Three things. Number one, the end of the permissible time period, which is how long for travelers?
3 days.
3 days, 3 nights, right? 72 hours, basically. And for residents, 1 hour. How do you say resident in Arabic? Muqim. And how do you say traveler? Musafir. Right? So for the muqim, the one who's not traveling, right? Who's at home, his hometown, the end of that period is 1 day. Okay, and number two, what invalidates the wiping is post-sex impurity. So for example, I'm going to be very explicit here, let's say somebody, be very explicit, somebody has sexual intercourse with their socks on, you have to take your socks off, take a shower, right? You don't go in the shower with your socks on anyways at home. But if you did, that wouldn't be valid. You have to take your socks off for your wudu for your tahara to be fully valid. If you have sexual intercourse while you're wearing socks, while you're in a state of tahara, your tahara is now broken. Period. And then you need to take them off and wash your whole body, ghusl, to be back in tahara again. Number three, removal of the socks. If you take your socks off, then the period of wiping is invalidated. If you broke your wudu in the meantime, if you kept your wudu and you took off your socks and put them back on, it's still valid. Right? Make sense? Yeah? Any questions?
I have a quick comment to add.
Yeah.
It reminds me when you said this, I walked into a door one time. One day I was drenched, sock was drenched in water. It was washing the whole, I'm like, what are you doing? Instead of wiping, it was washing the sock. I'm like, it's a lot more like, ignorant for this,
Yeah, people are, that's why these are, like, this is not knowledge to be taken for granted, because people don't know. People legitimately do not know, right? They do a lot of strange things. You see people, when it comes to making wudu, they'll just like, if they're not wearing socks, they'll like wipe their feet. Your wudu's not valid. You have to wash your foot. Or whatever other weird things that people may do, right? Washing their whole feet with their socks on. It's going to mess up a lot of things. Alright. So, let's see. Let's talk about al-ghusl. I think Salah is at 6, Salah al-Asr. And so we'll break in a couple minutes, inshallah. Okay. So, let's move to al-ghusl. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَإِن كُنْتُمْ جُنُوبًا فَطَهَّرُوا. If you are in a state of janaba, if you are sexually impure, purify yourselves. That's the Quranic injunction telling us to seek tahara by making ghusl, right? Which is different than making wudu. Because there's two types of hadath. Remember we talked about this? There is al-hadath al-asghar, al-hadath al-asghar, and al-hadath al-akbar. Right? Hadath al-asghar is what? Is when you lose your wudu. Pass gas, use the toilet, etc. Al-hadath al-akbar, when somebody becomes when someone has become sexually impure. That's called al-hadath al-akbar. They need ghusl to engage acts of ibadah and such. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah Al-Baqarah, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ويسألونك عن المحيض قل هو أذى فاعتزلوا النساء في المحيض ولا تقربوهن حتى يطهرن فإذا تطهرن فأتوهن من حيث أمركم الله إن الله يحب التوابين ويحب المتطهرين. That they question you concerning menstruation, say it is an illness. It is an illness, not a good translation. It is there's something which there is harm in it. There's a difficulty in it. So let women alone at such times, meaning do not engage sexually with women, as the order is for men, and do not have sex with them until they are cleansed. And cleansed here means until they make ghusl. So these are the two main scenarios. When somebody is in a state of sexual impurity, or when women have ended their menstruation. That's when ghusl is required. Okay, so let's talk about some of these so let's talk about some of the actions that require ghusl. They are 5 in number. Number 1, when there is and this is a little bit of sensitive information here based on the subject matter. And because that is the case, and because it's time for Salah, let's stop here, and we'll resume after the Salah. And also, I didn't want to make uncles and all of them feel like what is going on. The first thing